They found him upright in a locked room. No name, no wounds, just a key sewn into his coat and a photo with her face scratched out. I didn't mean to get pulled in, but I knew that kind of silence. And I knew once I opened the door, I couldn't walk away. The call came in just after 4:00 a.m., Water Street, 2nd floor, above a boarded-up tailor shop with a rusted sign and windows too clean for a place that's been shut for years. I was already awake, couldn't sleep. Been happening more lately. Maybe it's the noise the city makes when it's pretending to be quiet, or maybe it's something else. Uniform said it was weird. That's how he put it. Weird. Not violent, not messy, just strange. That was enough to get me down there. The front door was locked when I arrived. No sign of forced entry. They had to call the fire department to get in. The metal door groaned open like it hadn't been touched in years. Smelled like dust and something too clean, like bleach after a storm. The apartment was small, tight hallway, single room with a kitchenette and a chair facing the window. And in that chair was him. Middle-aged, maybe late 50s, hard to tell. Dark suit, pressed, expensive, sitting upright, hands on the armrests like he'd been placed there, not like he'd fallen asleep. Eyes closed, no signs of a struggle, no bruises, no blood, just stillness and silence. He looked like he was waiting. Like if I waited long enough, he might open his eyes and say, "Took you long enough." No ID, no wallet, no watch. Nothing in his pockets except a matchbook from a jazz bar in Harlem and a single key sewn into the inside of his lapel. Not pinned, sewn, deliberate, hidden. The air in the room felt thick, like it had been holding its breath. Everything was clean, too clean, nothing out of place. One mug in the sink, one fork on the counter. No mail, no clutter, no pictures, no noise. It was like someone had scrubbed the life out of it. I checked the window, locked from the inside. Fire escape untouched. Door dead-bolted behind him. No sign of entry, no indication he'd left or let anyone in. But someone had been here. You don't sit yourself in a chair that straight without help. You don't sew keys into your coat unless you're hiding something you want found by the right hands. The key was small, old, brass, no markings. Could be anything. Locker, lockbox, safe deposit, storage unit. But it wasn't about the key itself. It was the way it was placed. Sewn where only someone like me would think to look. Like an invitation. I stood there for a long time, listening to the radiator tick and the slow hum of the city bleeding through the brick. And I realized I wasn't in a crime scene. I was in a message. Someone wanted this body found, wanted the suit, the chair, the key. The man wasn't hiding. He was telling a story. I just didn't know the ending yet. But I knew one thing already. This wasn't the first time someone disappeared on Water Street, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. The room didn't change with daylight. Most crime scenes soften when the sun comes up. Shadows shrink, edges blur, truth hides behind color. But not this one. This place stayed hard, still, like it had been holding its pose all night and wasn't about to stop for the morning shift. I came back alone. Needed to see it again, without noise, without uniforms breathing down my neck. The door had been sealed, taped like it mattered, but the dead don't mind company and the locks didn't stop me. Same chair, same window, same feeling, like the walls were listening. The apartment wasn't just clean, it was staged. Every object in the room had its place, like someone was trying to tell a story without words. One plate, one fork, one glass, spotless. The bed was made, tight as a drum. The bathroom had exactly 2 towels, folded to the inch. There was no dust, no laundry, no smell of life. But it wasn't empty, it was curated. A room made to be seen, not lived in. Like the man who died here knew he wouldn't get another chance to explain himself, so he used the furniture to talk. And then there was the photograph, tucked under the edge of the lamp on the nightstand. Easy to miss unless you were looking for something that didn't fit. Black and white, old, cracked down the center like it had been folded too many times. A woman, mid-30s maybe, standing on a pier with her hands in her coat pockets and the wind in her hair. Her body faced the camera, but her head was turned slightly to the left. A breeze or a whisper, hard to tell. But her face was scratched out, not torn, not burned, scratched, with something sharp, careful, methodical, like someone had taken their time erasing her. One slow drag of a blade across the eyes, the mouth, the outline of who she was. But the rest of her remained. Like whoever did it couldn't quite bring themselves to throw her away. I turned the photo over. Nothing written, no date, no name. But something about it clawed at the back of my brain. Not recognition, not déjà vu, just weight. Like I'd stumbled on the last page of a book I didn't know I was reading. I stood at the window and looked out. Blind alley, no view, no escape. Just bricks and shadow and the faint smell of garbage from a dumpster 2 stories below. But the man had chosen that chair, facing that window. Not the one with sun, not the one with sky. He'd sat there, watching nothing. Or maybe waiting for it to look back. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a room where someone died. It was a stage, a memory frozen in place. And the man in the chair hadn't been alone. Not really, because something had stayed behind, and it was still watching. Mr. Besso was already waiting when I came down the stairs, standing behind the counter of a shop that looked like it had been preserved in amber. Thread spools stacked like towers, bolts of cloth wrapped in plastic, and an old radio playing Sinatra through a speaker that crackled like it needed a priest. The sign outside said closed. It had said that for 2 years, according to the building registry. But inside, everything was spotless, scissors polished, tape measures hung like medals. The old man hadn't stopped working, just stopped letting anyone in. He watched me with those slow eyes, dark, unreadable, like fabric that never wrinkles. He didn't ask for a badge, didn't need to. "You're with the police," he said, voice low and raspy, like every sentence cost him something. I nodded. "You own the building?" "For 60 years. His hand moved to a drawer and pulled out a folder. Rental agreements, maintenance reports, inspections going back to the Ford administration. "But that apartment, no tenant." "How long?" 8, maybe 9 months. Last man paid through the end of the lease, then disappeared. Left no forwarding address, took nothing. I waited. Sometimes silence pulls more than pressure. He didn't flinch, but his jaw set. Slight, controlled. The kind of gesture you only catch if you've been lied to enough times. "The man upstairs, doesn't match any name on your books?" "Never seen him before." His answer came too fast. Practiced, like he'd been turning it over in his head since the body was found. "You sure?" "I run a shop, detective, not a hotel. I don't ask for names unless someone wants a hem fixed." I glanced around the room. Not a speck of dust, not a thread out of place. Even the mannequin in the corner had a tie knotted too perfectly to be accidental. "You didn't hear anything?" I asked. "No footsteps, no noise?" "Old buildings make noise. I stopped listening years ago." He turned to the register like the conversation was over, like he was choosing to clock out of the moment. But I didn't move. "He was wearing a tailored suit," I said. "Italian wool, hand-stitched buttonholes, very recent work. You don't recognize it?" The old man paused. "Lots of tailors in the city," he said, "but only one below the room he died in." He didn't answer, just slid the drawer shut with a soft click. I let the silence hang again, but it didn't break this time. He'd closed up, sewn his own lips shut. As I walked to the door, I turned back once. "You ever sew something shut so tight it never opens again?" Mr. Besso didn't look at me. "Every day," he said. Then he turned up the radio and let Sinatra sing me out. The ME called me back to the morgue that evening. Said there was something about the stitching, not the cause of death. He still didn't have that. Said the guy looked like he just stopped. Heart perfect. No drugs, no trauma. Just stillness. But it was the suit that bothered him. "Too tight in the shoulders," he said. "Too long in the arms. This wasn't made for him." I stood over the slab. The man looked smaller here, like the chair had lent him gravity. Stripped of the window, the suit, the silence, he was just another unsolved. But I kept looking. The fabric was fine. Better than most detectives could afford in 3 paychecks. Italian wool, navy blue, single-breasted, real horn buttons. Whoever made it knew what they were doing, but they didn't make it for him. "There are signs of recent alteration," the ME said, pointing with a gloved finger. "Taken in at the waist, let out at the chest, slight rework on the sleeves." I nodded. Tailoring like that doesn't come cheap, and it doesn't get done on a whim. Which meant he either inherited the suit or borrowed it for something important, something final. I had them bag the jacket separately, took it back to the precinct and went over every inch, stitch by stitch, collar, lapel, pocket flaps. Nothing. But something about it still felt off. Then I checked the inner lining, and there it was, tucked between the silk and the stitch, near the right side seam. A small, rectangular label. Not a brand tag, no designer name. Just a single line, hand-embroidered in silver thread, for R. That stopped me. It wasn't a name, not a full one, not enough to trace, but it was personal, private. Something someone would have seen every time they pulled the coat off a hanger. Something not meant for anyone else. For R. Not by, not to, for, like a gift, like a promise, like a weight. I pressed my fingers into the lining again, found a faint ridge near the hem, a second seam hidden beneath the first, carefully picked apart with a paper clip until it gave. Inside, nothing but thread. Still, someone had gone to the trouble of hiding that label, that message, which meant whoever wore this suit wanted to carry something no one else would notice, or maybe they wanted someone to find it, just not too soon. I sat back in my chair and stared at the name again. R could have been anything. Robert, Roslyn, Rook. Just a letter, but it meant someone had made this suit for someone else, and the man upstairs wasn't him, which left me with one question. Who wears a suit tailored for someone else, alters it to fit, then dies in it, quietly, alone, like they're dressing for their own funeral? And what kind of secret needs to be stitched into the lining? I didn't have an answer, but I had a feeling R was about to pull me deeper than I meant to go. The photo had been bothering me in ways I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just the scratches. Plenty of people try to erase a face when it hurts too much to see. No, it was the pose. The way she stood, not quite centered, as if someone had caught her mid-thought. It didn't feel like a snapshot. It felt staged, intentional. I had the lab scan it, high-res, pulled the paper stock, ran a dye analysis. They got lucky. Tiny embossed lettering in the corner, almost invisible to the naked eye. A photographer's mark, Delancey Studio. Didn't even know it still existed. It did. Barely. Back corner of a second-floor walk-up above a bakery that smelled like burnt sugar and regrets. The studio had no sign, no front desk, just a peeling door and the sound of humming from inside. A man in his 70s met me at the threshold, glasses fogged from developing chemicals and time. "Studio's closed," he said. "I'm not here for a sitting." I showed him the photo. "Did you take this?" He leaned in, squinted, then froze. "Roslyn Kerr," he said quietly, like the name still had weight. God, that's a name I haven't heard in years. "You remember her?" "She came in 81. Spring, I think. Wanted professional shots. Said she needed them for a portfolio. Actress maybe, or dancer. She was quiet, polite, paid in cash." He turned, rummaged through a drawer stacked with old negatives and yellowed sleeves. "I don't throw anything out," he said, half defensive, "even when I probably should." He found the roll, labeled in faded ink, Kerr, R. I looked through the negatives on the light table, dozens of frames, Roslyn in different poses, by a window, against a brick wall, one with her coat on, one with it off, but always with that same expression, like she was halfway between staying and running. And in every shot, she was alone, except one. Near the end of the roll, a blurred silhouette behind her, caught in motion. Someone stepping into the frame. Just a sliver, a shoulder, a hand reaching. But it was enough to know she hadn't come alone. "Was that her boyfriend?" I asked. The photographer shook his head. She never mentioned one, but the last time she came by, she looked scared. Asked if she could pick up the prints early. Said she might be leaving town. "Did she?" He sighed. "Never came back. I kept the negatives just in case. Then I read about her a few weeks later." "In the paper?" He nodded. "Missing. No trace. They used one of my prints for the article, but not this one. He tapped the scratched photo. That shot wasn't part of what I gave them, which means someone else had it. He nodded again, slower this time. Someone close to her, maybe. Someone who didn't want to forget her, or wanted to make sure no one else remembered. I took a copy of the negative. As I stepped out onto Delancey, the city felt heavier. Rosalind Kerr. She wasn't just a girl in a photo. She was the question I didn't know I'd been asking, and someone had worked very hard to make sure she never got an answer. The address on Rosalind Kerr's file led me to the edge of Alphabet City, where the streets feel like they've forgotten their own names. The building was still standing, barely. 3 floors of sagging brick, plywood windows, and a crooked stoop that leaned like it was trying to sit down and rest. The front door had been boarded shut, graffiti scrawled across it like the city had tried to bury it beneath spray paint and broken promises. Eviction records dated back to 1982. Utilities shut off the same year. No forwarding address, no maintenance. No sign that anyone had cared what happened to the people who lived there. But someone still did. 3rd floor, window on the left. Someone had strung a plastic curtain through a crack in the frame, and from the street it fluttered like a flag that didn't belong to any country. I buzzed the building next door and waited. No answer. I was about to walk when the door creaked open just enough for a single wary eye to peek through. She was in her 80s, maybe older. Thin frame, housecoat, slippers worn to the thread. Eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "You're not City," she said. "No," I replied. "Detective Raines, looking into a cold case. Rosalind Kerr lived in that building back in '81. Her face didn't change, but something behind her eyes pulled taut. "I remember her. Can I ask you a few questions?" She stepped back and opened the door without a word, led me into a narrow hallway that smelled like soup and mothballs, and sat down in a vinyl chair next to a bird cage with no bird. "She was a sweet girl," she said. "Quiet, polite, lived alone. But you could tell she wasn't used to being lonely. Always kept her window open, even in the cold. Said she liked hearing the city breathe." "Did she ever mention where she worked?" "She said a restaurant, somewhere by the water. Wore black shoes, always clean. You don't keep shoes like that clean unless someone's watching." "Did she have visitors?" She nodded slowly. "One man, came around once, twice a week. Tall, nervous, always looking over his shoulder like someone might follow him. Never stayed long, never smiled." "Did she seem afraid of him?" "No, but he seemed afraid of her. Or maybe of whatever followed her around." She looked toward the window, toward the condemned building across the alley. "The night she vanished, I heard shouting. Not loud, like someone was trying not to be heard. I didn't look. That's the part I regret. You live long enough, you learn that not looking is its own kind of sin." I handed her the scratched photo. "She's in this one. Recognize him?" She stared, then pointed to the edge of the frame, to the ghost of a man half in shadow. "That's him. The man who always looks scared." I tucked the photo back into my coat. "You think he hurt her?" She shook her head. "No, I think he loved her." She paused. "But sometimes love is just another kind of fear." And for the first time all day, I knew exactly what she meant. The key had been sitting on my desk for 3 days. Small, brass, worn smooth on the edges like it had changed pockets 1,000 times before someone finally sewed it into a suit and died with it. I'd had it tested. No prints, no markings. Just a number faintly etched into the underside. 1267. It was a long shot. Most of these things are. But every lock wants to be opened. You just have to ask the right question. I started with banks. Not the big ones. The old ones. The kind that still had safety deposit boxes you needed a key and a signature to open. I hit 7 in 2 days. Found the 8th in the financial district. Stone building, frosted glass, the kind of place that still pretended it wasn't dying. When I asked about box 1267, the manager flinched like I'd whispered something obscene. "Do you have the key?" he asked, his voice a little too steady. I showed it. He hesitated, then led me downstairs without another word. The vault door groaned like a secret opening its jaw. Inside, the air felt heavier, older, like it hadn't been moved in years. Box 1267 was halfway down the wall, The key turned like it was remembering its place. The manager stepped back. "Take your time," he said, then left me alone. The box was light. Inside, one object wrapped in brown wax paper and a folded note with handwriting so clean it felt surgical. I opened the paper first. An 8mm film reel, small, dusty. The label had worn off, but someone had taken care to wind it tight, clean the spool. It hadn't been handled much, just preserved, like it was waiting. Then I opened the note. 6 words. Do not forget what we did. No name, no signature, just that. What we did, not what I did. We. This wasn't guilt in isolation. It was a partnership, a pact. The kind people make when they know the truth would ruin them both. I stared at the reel for a long time, thought about how hard you have to work to hide something for decades, how much silence it takes to drown a story. The man in the suit died alone, but he didn't die empty. He left this behind. Not for me. For someone else, probably. But I was the one holding it now. Whatever was on that film, it mattered. Enough to keep it locked in a box no one had touched in years. Enough to wear a key into your grave. I slid the reel into an evidence pouch and folded the note once more. Then I locked the box and left with a weight I hadn't earned, but now had to carry because someone had remembered. And now, so would I. I went back to see Besso the next morning. The shop was still dark, door locked, sign flipped to closed like it had been welded that way. But I knocked anyway. Twice. Then a third time, slower. He opened it halfway, chain still latched. "You again," he muttered. "I need a name," I said. He didn't answer, just stared at me like I'd tracked in something the wind couldn't wash away. "Look," I said, "the man upstairs, I know you saw him, probably more than once." Silence. "Tailors don't forget suits," I added, "or who wore them, and that one wasn't made for him." That did it. He unlatched the door, let it creak open. The air inside still smelled like wool and dust and old smoke. He shuffled back behind the counter, pulled a stool out from under the register, and sat like the weight of the building finally got to him. "He called himself Rook," Besso said. "No first name, just that. Rook." He said it like the word had sharp corners. Came around now and then. Never talked much, paid in cash, always cash. Had this way of walking, like he didn't want the ground to notice. I waited. "He was particular," Besso said. "Not just about the suits, about everything. Told me exactly where to cut, where to taper. But it was like he was describing someone else, not him. Measurements were close, but not perfect, like he was wearing someone else's life." "When was the last time you saw him?" "Month ago. Maybe more." His fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the counter. He looked worse, pale, eyes sunk in like the dark was winning. Said he needed a rush job. One final fit. Brought the fabric himself. I didn't ask where it came from. "Did he say why?" "No," Besso said, but he tipped me in silence, like he was leaving something behind. I showed him the label from the suit. For R. He didn't look surprised. "Wasn't his?" he said. "I've stitched 1,000 names into 1,000 linings. That one wasn't for him." "But he wore it anyway." Besso nodded slowly. "Like armor. Or punishment. What do you think he was running from?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "You ever see a man who's been haunted so long he starts keeping company with ghosts just to feel less alone?" "Yeah," I said. "Once or twice." "Well," Besso said, standing slowly, his knees cracking like old branches, "that's who Rook was. The kind of man who didn't just carry a secret. He bled it." He walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The alley below was empty. No cars, no shadows, just rain soaking into the brick. "You'd think the dead were following him," Besso said. And from the look in his eyes, I wasn't sure he was speaking metaphorically. The city never gives you silence. You have to steal it. I found mine in the AV room beneath the precinct, lights dimmed low, projector humming like an old engine trying to remember how to run. I threaded the 8mm film reel with hands steadier than I expected. It felt like handling bone. No label, no sound. Just 60 feet of memory waiting to breathe again. The screen flickered once, then caught. Grainy footage, black and white, a room I didn't recognize, small, windowless, lit by a single overhead bulb that swung like it was nervous. No timestamp, no audio, just motion. 2 men, one already seated, back to the camera, shoulders hunched, suit tight across the frame. The other stood pacing, arms slicing through the air like he was trying to cut through the walls. And in the far corner, a woman. She wasn't facing the lens. Her hands were pressed to her mouth, eyes glassy. The way she moved told me everything. The stuttering sway of someone who wanted to vanish into the plaster. Rosalind. It had to be her. Might be better if he's gone. They didn't mean reassigned, they meant erased. I called the cold case division, asked for the Algren file. It took 3 hours and a favor I didn't want to cash in, but it landed on my desk by sundown. Thin, too thin. The only personal note in the whole file was a scrawl from his ex-wife, written in 1986 when they tried to track next of kin. I don't know where Leon is. He always said if he vanished, it would be for good. Said he wasn't afraid of dying, just of being found. It sounded like poetry until you read it twice. The last known sighting of Algren was near the docks in '83. Witness said he was arguing with someone. Man in a long coat. No description beyond that. No follow-up, no composite sketch. Just silence. And now here he was, on a reel of film, yelling at a man who would die in a chair above a dead tailor's shop, with a key in his coat and a ghost in his pocket. Leon Algren didn't just disappear. He vanished on purpose. And whatever he was trying to hide, I had a feeling it was about to surface. The kind of story I was chasing didn't live in precinct archives or courthouse basements. It lived in cigarette smoke and forgotten bylines. The kind of memory you only find in someone who stopped being a reporter when it stopped being safe to print what they knew. I found him in a rent-controlled apartment in the East Village, 5th floor walk-up, window view of a brick wall and an air shaft filled with pigeons. Marvin glass. Used to write for the Herald, back when ink meant something. Covered cops, corruption, and the space between them. Retired or pushed around the same time Leon Algren vanished. He opened the door in socks and a Mets t-shirt, eyes bloodshot but sharp. He looked me up and down like he was deciding if I was real. "Detective?" he said, voice gravel and bourbon. "Took you long enough." I didn't bother asking how he knew. He waved me in without ceremony. The apartment was a graveyard of old newspapers, VHS tapes, and coffee mugs stained into permanence. He sat in a recliner that might have been new when Reagan was still acting. "You said it was about Algren," he said. I nodded. "You wrote about him." He chuckled. "That's one way to put it. I wrote around him, wrote what I could without losing my desk or my teeth." "What was he into?" Glass leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Algren wasn't dirty. That's what made him dangerous. He poked at things that weren't supposed to bleed. Politicians, developers, cops with second incomes and third passports. He was chasing something big, something no one wanted touched. Something connected to a missing woman? Rosalind Kerr," he said without missing a beat. "Yeah, he came to me once, brought a photo, asked if I'd ever heard the name. I hadn't, but he looked scared. Not for himself, for her." I pulled the still from the film. Rook, Algren, the envelope. Glass took one look and nodded. That was the handoff. That envelope, that was the whole storm in a paper shell. Algren told me once he had proof, not just whispers, documents, photos, names. Said if he ever disappeared, it meant someone got scared enough to make him quiet. "You think that envelope had the proof?" "I think it was radioactive," he said. "Something that could burn a hole through a city if you looked at it too long." "What happened to it?" "No one knows. But Algren, he didn't just vanish. He was erased, like a bad idea." I stood, thanked him, started for the door. "One more thing," he said. "If you're digging this deep, you better ask yourself something." "What's that?" "When you find the truth, are you gonna bury it like everyone else? Or are you gonna let it bury you?" I didn't have an answer, but the reel was still in my coat pocket and the ghosts were getting louder. Whatever was in that envelope, it didn't die with Algren. It was still out there, waiting. The file room at One Police Plaza is colder than most morgues. Maybe it's the air conditioning. Maybe it's the ghosts. Most people only come down here when they're forced to. I come when I need to breathe in the things the city tried to forget. I pulled Algren's old case files. 6 boxes, half labeled, half lost, dust caked into the tape. Most of it was routine: narcotics, rackets, some street-level shakedowns, a few arrest records he never pushed through. But then there was the thin folder in the middle of box 4. No markings, just a file number and a date. April 13th, 1981. Rosalind Kerr. I felt it before I opened it. This wasn't a normal missing persons report. It was too light. 4 pages. No witness statements, no interviews, no canvassing records. Just a single sheet of intake, a grainy photo paper clipped to the top, and a rubber stamp that said, "Case closed, no foul play suspected. Closed in 7 days." 7. That's not how real disappearances work. Not in New York. Not when there's no body, no explanation, no follow-up. Unless someone wants it closed. The name typed at the bottom, Detective Leon Algren. The photo was the same one I'd seen in Glass's apartment. Rosalind, black coat, uncertain eyes. It looked like a shot you'd keep in your wallet, not file away in a case binder. I dug deeper, called in a quiet favor with records, told them I needed Algren's clearance logs. They hesitated, then sent over a list marked sensitive/non-redacted only, which means someone else still has the rest under lock and threat. In April of '81, Algren checked out 5 case files unrelated to his current assignments. One of them had a code next to it, Echo 17A. I ran it, came back with nothing. Not a name, not a department, just a red digital dead end. So I did what you do when the city won't talk. I asked the paper. Marvin Glass answered on the second ring. "Project Echo," I said. "What do you know?" He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You found that in Algren's file?" "Yeah." Another pause. That was the one they weren't supposed to name. Echo wasn't a task force. It was a shadow. Internal affairs, federal liaisons, political players, surveillance, black bag jobs. Most of the guys who worked it disappeared into consulting or concrete. Rosalind? She wasn't supposed to be part of it, but she got close to something, or someone. Word was she was a courier, passed information through safe hands. Algren tried to get her out, and failed. He didn't just fail, Glass said. He buried it, on orders or out of fear, I don't know. But Echo wasn't just a project, it was a warning. I hung up and looked back down at the file. Filed and closed in a week, no foul play suspected. But everything about it smelled like bleach. Project Echo. It was more than a name. It was the shadow you disappeared into when the truth got too loud. And Rosalind Kerr, she'd whispered something Echo didn't want heard. And now I was listening. The name kept echoing, no pun intended. I heard it in the silence between reports, in the absences where files should have been, in the weight of every sentence people didn't finish. Project Echo. Not a task force you could Google, not something that lived in dusty archives. It existed between lines, in rooms without windows, and the kind of ink that doesn't dry unless someone dies with the secret. I followed the trail to an old precinct on Canal that hadn't seen a live case since the towers fell. Storage now. Closed to the public, technically, but I knew a guy in records who owed me from a mess I pulled him out of back in '09. Name was Navarro. Good guy. Nervous, which meant he was still useful. "Echo?" he said the moment I said it. "You're not supposed to ask about that." "I'm not supposed to do a lot of things," I replied. "Got anything?" He chewed his lip, scanned the room, then led me through a steel door that needed 2 key cards and a little prayer to open. The air back there was dry as bone and colder than a church in winter. He pulled a cardboard banker's box off a back shelf. No label, no markings, just dust and neglect. "This is it," he whispered. "Never scanned, not logged, didn't exist unless you know it's here." I opened the box. Inside, manila folders, thin and yellowed, pages clipped together, all typed on machines that predated every computer I'd ever used. The title page on the first one, Project Echo Internal Operations Summary. No department header, no officer names, no rank, just directives. Surveillance of suspected political radicals, undercover placements in activist groups, phone taps, mail monitoring, Sounded like 1971, but this was dated 1980. And it wasn't just fringe groups, it was city employees, teachers, librarians. And then, the list. Persons of interest. I skimmed names. Most were nothing to me. But halfway down, there she was. Kerr Roslyn. Dated March 14th, 1981. Designation: courier contact. Status: under review. No explanation, no details. Just that. She wasn't a suspect. She wasn't a target. She was involved. Not accused of leaking, just passing something from one hand to another. And that was enough to land her on Echo's list. Another note 2 pages later. Cross-reference flagged. Date: Leon Algren, NYPD OCU. Association unclear. Monitor activity. I felt the back of my neck go tight. Roslyn was in the system, and Algren was too, which meant someone up the chain knew they were connected. Maybe they approved it, maybe they didn't. But they watched, and when things went sideways, they made sure neither of them came back. I asked Navarro if he had anything else. He shook his head and slipped back into the hallway like he'd never been there. I stared down at the box. No smoking gun, no confession. But I wasn't looking for truth anymore. I was looking for the people who buried it, and I'd just found their shovel. I met him in the back booth of a diner off Northern Boulevard, the kind of place that serves coffee like punishment and pancakes too heavy to float in syrup. The blinds were half closed, windows fogged with city breath. He was already there when I walked in, face down in a cup, coat zipped to the neck, like anonymity was a habit he couldn't shake. Name was Hendricks. Used to work undercover for internal affairs back when that still meant something. Retired early, disappeared into upstate silence. But his number hadn't changed, and when I left a message mentioning Project Echo, he called me back within the hour. "You're not the first to ask," he said as I sat down. No, but you're the first one who used her name. Roslyn Kerr. He nodded, slow and deliberate, then took a sip of coffee like it hurt going down. "She didn't know how deep she was," he said. "That was the tragedy. Most people in that world, they know the weight of the thing they're carrying. She thought it was paper. It was dynamite. She was a courier. Unofficial," he said. "No badge, no clearance. But she knew how to move through places unnoticed. That was rare. She passed messages between 2 internal factions, cops who were trying to expose something and others trying to bury it deeper." "Which side was Algren on?" Hendricks looked out the window, then back at me. "Algren? He was trying to play both. Keep her safe, keep the information moving, stay ahead of the people who wanted them both erased. He didn't manage any of it." "And Rook?" He exhaled through his nose. The name landed like lead. "Rook wasn't her lover," he said. "That's the story people told because it was easier to stomach. But he was her handler, assigned, not chosen. Placed close to her to keep the line clear, keep her steady. But he got in too deep, forgot the line between duty and debt." "Was he part of Echo?" "Not officially, but no one on that list was clean. We were all puppets. Some of us just didn't know who was pulling the strings." "What happened to Roslyn?" "She vanished. That's the official version. But off the record, word was a drop went bad. She was supposed to meet someone. Algren got there late. Rook saw it coming too late. She got taken." "By who?" Hendricks shook his head. "Nobody ever said. Just that she ended up where Echo wanted her. Gone." "And Rook?" "Went aground. Quit the department, burned every bridge he had. They didn't kill him, which tells me he kept quiet. But he left a tape, a body in a chair, a key in his coat." Hendricks looked at me like he was seeing something behind my eyes. Then maybe he finally couldn't live with it. The waitress dropped the check. Hendricks slid out of the booth and paused just long enough to drop one more piece. "Rook didn't love her, Detective." He looked down at the table, then back. "He failed her. That's worse." And just like that, he walked out into the cold, leaving me with a name, a reel of film, and a story that still hadn't finished bleeding. The Seabright Hotel used to be one of those places where the curtains never fully closed and the carpet knew more secrets than the front desk ever asked for. Last real guest probably checked out around the same time shoulder pads and cassette tapes did. Now it was condemned, half-gutted, and held together by rust and bad history. The kind of place the city lets rot because even the rats stopped showing up. Room 410 was at the end of a hallway that smelled like mildew and the kind of regret that never learned how to leave. The door was warped, lock long since rusted through. I didn't have to force it, just leaned in and let time do the rest. Inside, the air was still, not just old, preserved, like whatever happened here had frozen the room in place. Peeling wallpaper, a mattress that looked like it had tried to eat itself, a chair facing the window that was now a mouth of broken glass and pigeon droppings. But someone had been here since the rot set in. The dust told the story. Scuffed footprints, a trail leading from the door to the desk. Drawers had been opened, not ransacked. Whoever came through wasn't searching. They were checking, like they'd left something here once and wanted to see if it was still where they left it. I followed the dust trail to the closet. In the corner, behind the warped slats of wood, I found it. A ledger. Just one torn page, stuck behind the molding. The rest of the book had been ripped out or rotted through, but this piece had survived. Faded ink, hotel script. 4 lines. No dates, no details. Just names. L. Algren, R. Kerr, blank, Rook. The first 3 had been crossed out in pen, firm strokes, meant to erase. Only Rook remained untouched. I stared at that page like it might breathe if I looked hard enough. This wasn't a guest list, this was a roster. A list of people who had been involved, maybe in that room, maybe in something bigger. The kind of list you don't file. You hide it, bury it, burn it. And someone had tried. But they didn't finish the job. This wasn't just a meeting place, it was a turning point. Maybe the drop. Maybe where the lines blurred between safety and disappearance. Maybe where Rosalind stopped being a name and became a memory no one wanted to claim. I slipped the page into my notebook and took one last look around. The room said nothing. But the silence was louder now. Rook had come here, checked the closet, found the ledger, saw the names, and for some reason, didn't cross his out. Maybe because he knew he'd be the last one left, or maybe because he knew, when it all came full circle, someone would have to find it. Rook was a ghost long before I found him dead in that chair. I pulled his name through every database I could access. NYPD employee records, Social Security, DMV, federal watch lists. Most of it came back with a shrug. A couple of vague notations, a redacted personnel file, a half-buried insurance claim. But then I found it. One line, deep in the city's death registry. Rook, Daniel A. Presumed deceased. June 17, 1991. Status, declared. Body, not recovered. The note under cause of death was one word, missing. They'd closed the file without finding him. No family, no burial, no questions. Just a formality for the state. Tie up the books, erase the name. But now I had a body, and no one's called to update the file. I took the report to the ME, asked him to go over the autopsy again, not the paperwork, the body. Sometimes truth doesn't live in ink. He pulled the drawer, rolled it out like he was opening a long sealed envelope. Rook looked peaceful, still, the kind of still you don't see unless someone chooses it. No sign of trauma, the ME said again. No contusions, no abrasions, no signs of restraint. Toxicology came back clean. No drugs, no alcohol, no trace chemicals. It's like he just stopped. He pulled the sheet down further, showed me the hands. Here's what's odd, he said. Muscle tone in the fingers. Not stiff, not bloated. Almost like he was holding something until right before he died. Something small, something important. But you didn't find anything. Nothing on him. I thought about the envelope in the film, the key sewn into the coat, the ledger in the hotel, and the hands that looked like they were still clinging to a past no one else wanted. What's your guess? I asked. The ME shrugged. Sometimes the body just gives out, but this feels like a choice, like he willed himself to stop. I left the morgue with more questions than when I'd walked in. That's how this case worked. Every answer came with a hinge and a second door behind it. Rook had vanished in '91. Now he was here, in my city, in a suit not made for him, sitting in a chair like he was waiting for someone to finish the story he couldn't. But why resurface now? After all those years, why come back just to die? The trail he left wasn't messy. It was a breadcrumb path made for someone with time and patience and enough stubbornness to follow it. And whoever that someone was, it wasn't for the cops, wasn't for the headlines. It was for her. The woman with the scratched-out face. The one name still carved into memory long after every file had been stamped and shelved. Rosalind Kerr. He couldn't save her, but maybe dying like this he thought he could finally be honest. Even if it came too late to matter. Even if it came only to me. The reel had been sitting on my desk like a loaded gun. I'd watched it 5 times already. Every flicker, every frame, every crackle of static that passed for silence. I thought I knew it. Thought I'd squeezed all the truth out of it. But truth doesn't sit still. It shifts. Hides in the margins. So I threaded the film one more time, let the machine hum to life, and stared at the screen like it owed me something. Same room. Same argument. Rook seated, Algren pacing, arms slicing the air like he was trying to cut a hole through time. Rosalind in the corner, all wind and tension. The envelope hitting the table, the stare, the moment everything stopped. But this time, I didn't look at the people in the spotlight. I looked at the edges. There, in the far left of the frame, near the coat rack and just inside the door frame, a movement. Small, quick, subtle. A shape shifting against the grain, like a coat sleeve. Then a sliver of a shoe. Not part of the motion between the 3 actors in the scene, something else. A 4th presence. I paused the film, rewound it, let it roll in slow motion. It wasn't a glitch, it was someone else. The figure stayed mostly in shadow, half obscured by the angle and the grain. But you could tell, this wasn't a bystander. This was deliberate. A person standing still, watching, just out of reach, waiting. They never moved toward the others, never intervened, just stood. And the others? They didn't acknowledge it. Not Algren, not Rook, not Rosalind. Which told me this wasn't a secret presence. It was known, expected. Someone had been allowed in the room, but not on the record. Someone trusted, or feared. I watched the reel 3 more times, trying to catch a face, a clue, anything. But the light wasn't kind. The shadows were too thick, too practiced. But there was a single frame, a hiccup in the footage, where the swing of the overhead bulb caught something metallic. A flash. Not from the badge we already knew Algren wore. From the shadows. Another badge? A weapon? I couldn't tell, but whatever it was, it gleamed for half a second like a signal flare. Someone else had been there the night everything shattered. Not part of the fight, not part of the tape, but the reason it was made. I shut off the projector, sat in the dark. Algren hadn't just been arguing with Rook. He'd been performing. For the real, for the room, for the watcher in the dark. And maybe that envelope, whatever was inside it, wasn't meant to pass hands. Maybe it was bait. And someone took the hook. All these years we thought it was 3 people in that room. Turns out there were 4, and one of them walked away knowing exactly how the story would end. Because they were the one writing it. The second reel came in an unmarked envelope, no return address. Postmarked 2 days ago in Queens. No note inside. Just the reel, carefully wrapped in brown butcher paper and tied with a thin red thread, like a gift someone didn't want to give but couldn't keep anymore. It wasn't addressed to the precinct, it came to my apartment. Only 2 people knew I lived there. One of them was me. I didn't wait. Threaded the reel into the same old projector, the bulb still tired, the motor still groaning like it resented being asked to remember again. The film began. Same room, same angle, same moment. Rook seated, Algren pacing, the tension so thick it warped the air. But this wasn't the same reel. The framing was tighter, slightly off-center, like the camera had shifted, or maybe there had always been more than one. This time the lens sat closer to Rosalind. You could see her hands tremble. You could see the way her eyes darted, not at the men, but beyond them, past them, toward us, toward the camera. And then, halfway through the reel, just as the envelope hit the table and the conversation hit its peak, she turned, looked directly into the lens. No mistake. No glance. A full, deliberate stare. Like she knew. Like she'd known all along. Her lips moved. No sound, of course. But it wasn't hard to see. I played it again. Slowed it down. Watched every frame, every muscle twitch in her face. 3 syllables. 2 words. He's here. That was it. And then she looked away. Back toward the 2 men. Toward the argument she wasn't part of but somehow held the weight for. I played that moment 5 more times. He's here. Not you're here. Not they're here. He. A specific warning. Not fear. Not panic. Recognition. Rosalind hadn't just known she was being watched. She knew who was watching. And she wasn't surprised. I took stills of the frames, ran them through every enhancement program we had. Couldn't get more. Couldn't see the man in the shadows. But Rosalind had. And in that moment, her face said everything. She was already gone. Not in body, but in trust. In choice. You could see it. The flicker of someone who's realized the escape route they were promised was never real. That the walls were always closing in, and the people she counted on were already backing away. This reel wasn't insurance, it was testimony. A message buried in time, sealed in celluloid, sent to the future like a flare in a black sea. Someone had held on to this for years, decades, and now they'd let it go. Not to save Rosalind, but to make sure the truth, however late, still had a pulse. And now I knew. Rook hadn't been the only one keeping a secret. She had too. Only hers had eyes. And it had been watching all along. The chair had never sat right with me. There was something too intentional about it. The way Rook's body had been placed, the way the back faced the window instead of the door. It was theatrical, a pose. The kind of stillness you only choose when you want someone to find you and know exactly what they're looking at. I went back to the apartment alone. No warrant, no backup, just a gut feeling and a crowbar tucked behind my coat. The scene had already been cleared, catalogued, written off, case closed. Death with no trauma and no suspects tends to fall off the department's radar fast. But not mine. The chair was still there, still facing that window like it had something left to show. I ran my fingers along the base, knocked on the wood, hollow, pried. The panel came up easy, like someone had meant for it to be found, but only by the right hands. Inside, folded flat and tied with twine, was a single envelope. Yellowed. No name, no date, just weight. I sat down on the floor and opened it with the care you give something sacred. The letter was written in ballpoint pen, the ink faded but clear. The handwriting was sharp, precise, controlled, like every word had been rehearsed before the page ever knew it. I never meant to disappear, but it was easier than staying. I didn't kill her, but I let her go alone, and I've lived in silence ever since. My throat went dry. We were supposed to leave that night. I told her I'd be there. I meant it. But I let someone get in my head, told me it wasn't safe, told me I'd be watched, that if I went through with it, she'd end up buried with me. I believed him. No name. But I didn't need one. Algren. So I stayed away. I thought it would pass, that I could meet her a day later, a week. But when I came back, she was gone. Like the whole city had swallowed her. And I knew, deep down, I knew it was because I hesitated. I read the next line twice. She wasn't the target. She was the proof. She knew things no one was supposed to know. She thought she was just carrying messages. She didn't see how far the message traveled. The handwriting faltered near the end. I've walked with that night for 30 years, worn it like a coat, folded it into every room I've ever sat in. I see her when I sleep, not as a ghost, as a question I never answered. I didn't kill her, but I didn't save her either. And maybe that's worse. No signature, just silence. I folded the letter, tucked it into my coat, sat in that chair one last time and faced the same window, the same alley, the same dead air that Rook had breathed his last into. He hadn't been trying to escape. He'd been trying to speak. And now that I'd heard it, I wasn't sure I'd ever sleep again. Water Street looked different in the daylight. Not brighter, just less honest. The kind of light that washes over old stone and broken promises and makes them look like nothing ever happened there. Like no one ever sat in a chair waiting to die. I parked a few blocks off and walked the rest, hands in pockets, coat collar turned up against a wind that didn't need to be cold to feel sharp. The building was still quiet. The tailor's shop locked tight, the windows above empty. No tape, no patrol car, just the hum of city life pretending there was nothing left to see. I walked into the alley behind the building, the same one Rook's window faced, narrow, slick with runoff. A dumpster, broken pallets, a crushed can that hadn't been picked up in weeks. But the bricks caught my eye. One section, waist high, tucked between two rusted pipes, looked cleaner than the rest, like someone had tried to scrub it. Hard. I moved closer, brushed my fingers over the stone. And there it was, faint, faded, almost gone. Kerr, burned into the brick with something crude, not paint, not marker, etched, scorched, like a last act of penance. He left her name behind, not as a memorial, as an apology. Rook didn't just die in that room, he gave himself to it, sat down in the silence he'd carried for decades and folded into it like a final chapter no one else was willing to write. He'd spent 30 years pretending he wasn't a part of her disappearance. But in the end, he understood the truth. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you pulled the trigger. Sometimes just not showing up is enough to be guilty. He could have run again, could have faded deeper, but he didn't. He put on the suit, sat in the chair, left the key, the film, the letter, left her name, and waited, not for rescue, not for forgiveness, for someone like me, not a hero, just another tired man too stubborn to stop asking the questions everyone else walked past. There won't be a trial, no charges, no headlines. Kerr's case will stay cold, Rook's death will stay unexplained. The city doesn't update its ledgers for ghosts, but someone will clean that apartment. Someone will throw out that chair, and maybe, just maybe, someone will look at that mark on the wall and wonder what it meant. They won't know. But I will. Rosalind Kerr vanished in the shadows of a city built on silence. And Daniel Rook, the man who didn't stop it, didn't hide from it either. He came back to where it started, and let the silence take him. It wasn't justice, but it was something. A final name, a vanishing point, and a truth too late to save them, but not too late to be known.